We are living in a wild moment for designers where the insane amount of online educational resources is forcing many young or new, whatever age you are, designers to ask, are formal design education programs actually worth it anymore? Or is it smarter to go the self-taught route, kind of piecing together your own design education from all of these resources? So as someone who has done both the more traditional design school route as well as a lot of self-directed learning, I have thoughts on this topic. And today I just want to share what I wish someone had told me back when I was trying to figure all of this out. So by the end of this video, my hope is that whatever point of your design journey that you're in, you have a bit more clarity on what your options are, the pros and cons of each, and what might make the most sense for you specifically. And before diving in, I just want to give a bit of backstory so that you know where I'm coming from. I'm definitely going to try to give as balanced and unbiased a take on this topic as possible, but just for full disclosure, I'm going to give a short overview of my trajectory, or you can skip past this chapter if you want. Okay, so first I did go to university, but I did not study design. I studied fine art and English literature. Never opened Photoshop, didn't know what a UX designer was. Then after school, I started working in an advertising agency, and I was on the non-creative side, but I was interested in creative. So I taught myself enough basics and scraped together enough of a portfolio to convince them to move me into a graphic design role, eventually an art director role. I then realized I wanted more design knowledge. I didn't want to work in advertising forever, but that's kind of all I really knew how to do. And I just wanted more options. So I did decide to enroll in a 2-year design program where I eventually specialized in UX design. So I worked in UX for 5 or 6 years, beginning at startups, and I spent the longest amount of time during that period as a product designer at Shopify. Then in 2024, I decided to leave the tech world, leave my full-time role, and start my own web design business, which is what I do now. Okay, so this is not a video all about me. The only point I want to make here is that I've done both a lot of self-teaching early on, and then again when I was pivoting into full-time web design, and I've also done some of the traditional education route. All right, let's first talk about some downsides, then we can end on a more positive note. So some of these downsides of traditional design school might sound pretty obvious, but there's a few points I really want to emphasize. So the way I see it, one of the biggest obvious downsides is that it is more time to do a traditional design school program. So it's a big time commitment, usually between 1 and 4 years. So a significant period of time that you need to set aside to be really fully immersed and committed to learning this topic. If you're really motivated, that's obviously also enough time to potentially build a solid freelance business or land client work while teaching yourself as you go. So one thing I do want to add here is that I remember feeling like 2 years, which was the length of my program, felt like forever when I was considering what to do. But looking back, that time went by so quickly. And when I think about the full arc of a career, 2 years or even 4 in the bigger scheme is actually fairly insignificant. So just my 2 cents would be that if the time commitment is the only reason you have for not going the traditional school route, I would maybe consider whether that's really a deal breaker, but certainly something to take into account. Downside 2, the way I see it, design school costs more, okay? It's just a bigger investment than courses or self-directed learning. There's obviously a massive range in program cost. So the total price tag depends entirely on the type of degree or the kind of school you go to. But even if you go all in on the self-education route and you buy books and online courses, even hire a coach, it's still pretty much always going to be less expensive than most design programs, unless you have a scholarship. And a lot of people don't want to or are not in a position to take on that financial investment. And that's obviously completely valid. It's such a personal assessment at the end of the day. And side note here, if you are watching this and you feel like you fall into this category and the options available to you for school are either too expensive or maybe there just aren't great options where you live, I just want to take a second and reassure you that I have had so many designer friends and colleagues who have had incredible careers and never went to design school. So I just want to put that out there because I don't want anybody getting discouraged. The last big downside in my mind, well, downside depending on how you look at it, is that if you decide to make this significant investment of time and money, the stakes are a lot higher. So if you take a $500 or $1,000 UX course, for example, and then you realize that you're just not that into UX, that would be a disappointment, but it's not the end of the world. You still learn something about yourself. But if you realize, a year into your design program that you are not on the path that you want to be on, or if you realize that the quality of the education in the program doesn't live up to what you hoped it would be, that's obviously a bigger, costlier reality to face. So formal design school is a big bet. And ideally, if you do go that route, you want to be fairly certain that design is maybe not the whole rest of your career. I don't even know if I'm sure of that, but that it's definitely the next step or the next chapter that you want to take. I do want to point out that with this particular downside, I think that there's another side to this, which is that for me, because design school was a significant commitment, it kind of caused me to take the material and the coursework really seriously and to engage with the material a lot more actively than I would with like casual online courses or online teachers who I've followed in the past. So for me, the risk factor or the high stakes factor kind of worked in my favor in the end, but everyone is super different in this regard. Okay, now I want to talk about what I see as some of the biggest upsides of design school. So to me, the biggest one is that the curriculum will be very thorough. So there's less risk of developing design blind spots and less risk of having kind of a wobbly foundation. Formal academic programs are generally really comprehensive in a way that is just kind of tough to replicate. Not impossible, but hard. They generally expose you to all the foundational topics that you might otherwise skip. I know I would have probably skipped. And here's an example just to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about. So I now work as a web designer, and one of the clearest differences I've noticed between okay websites and like wow websites often comes down to typography. So not just choosing nice fonts, but all of those little adjustments that really work together to make a layout feel cohesive and very refined. So things like kerning, so the space between individual letters, the line height in headlines and in paragraph text, whether the type has too much space or not enough breathing room and needs to be tightened up. So most web design courses or UX boot camps will spend maybe one lesson on typography, if that, but most design programs will probably have a dedicated class on this topic, maybe for a whole quarter or even semester. And it won't just be a lecture on, here's what makes great typography. Okay, cool, now you get it, check. There will be assignments where you have to practice. There will be critiques where you have to put your work up on the wall. Then there will be more assignments. So unless you're just naturally a very gifted design genius, which I certainly am not, it does take a lot of practice to really get this stuff in your bones. And design school does kind of build this structure in. And typography is just one example, but other kind of boring sounding classes like color theory or grid systems, micro interactions, things that individually aren't so significant, but added up, they do pop up surprisingly often. Next big benefit of design school, I would say, is more accountability and people invested in your success. So, a big difference between design school and self directed education is just the support system. In a formal program, teachers often really get to know you and are very invested in your growth over months or years. And generally, they legitimately care how things turn out for you and are there to support you even after you've graduated. And it's the same with classmates. So there's just kind of a nice camaraderie and shared progress that I would say is hard to replicate with short term online courses or the Slack groups that get set up for boot camps or course cohorts. So, yeah, call me old fashioned, but I've just never found it quite to be the same as having in person classmates and teachers. This brings me to another point that I wanted to make in this video, which is that the reality is online courses are businesses. Now, I want to tread carefully here because I'm not here to drag course creators. There are some fantastic courses out there created by people who I think genuinely care and put in real effort to deliver value. That being said, I think it's just important to acknowledge the reality that pretty much all course instructors are running a business. And for a course business to succeed, it relies on marketing. Marketing for courses is generally putting forward a handful of really glowing testimonials from top or most enthusiastic students. That's not inherently bad. It's just kind of like marketing 101. But when it comes to choosing your educational path, I think it's very important to realize that those marketing materials are not necessarily representative of average long-term student outcomes. Most course platforms don't track and publish information like how many students finished the course, what percent of students got the outcome that they were aiming for. So the job or the promotion, the mastery of whatever new skill. So again, hearing the top 5 or so percent success story outcomes on a sales page or a podcast episode, I think it can create an inflated expectation of what to get out of a certain course. And if you contrast that with accredited programs through a university or community college, these typically do carefully track alumni outcomes. So when I was researching my own program, for example, I had data on percent of grads who were hired within 6 months of graduating, the average starting salaries of alumni, list of companies where alumni ended up working. And you can even go find alumni on LinkedIn and just see what they're up to and even message them directly to get candid feedback. I did that when I was choosing my own program. So with most online courses, you are just not going to get that visibility. And again, that does not mean that great courses don't exist. I think they absolutely do, but it's just something to stay aware of when you're deciding what path is the best for you, and something I wish I had had a bit more clarity on when I was navigating all of this. Final quick design school benefit I wanted to briefly touch on is having more legitimacy in the eyes of more traditional companies or clients. So the truth is, some companies use software to filter out applicants without formal education, and some hiring managers do care about different degrees. Even though I did not go to a fancy program, for example, I had a classmate who got a job offer at a large tech company. And that company actually did reach out to our school to confirm that she had indeed graduated with her degree. So I don't know, some companies really do care about this. I'm not saying that this is fair. I think it's not really. Your work and your personality / mindset, I think, are way more important than your specific education. But again, another factor to just be aware of, particularly if you're interested in working for bigger, more traditional companies. So having reviewed the main pros and cons of design school, I just want to add that a lot of this comes down to personality. So if you're considering the self-directed learning route, some things to ask yourself would be, do you feel like you are a pretty self-motivated person? Are you fairly disciplined and able to take like a full free day and break it down into chunks of time that you can prioritize pretty effectively? With design school, I would ask, do you feel really confident that you want to be designing in the next phase of your career? Do you tend to do better with more structure and accountability? And are you just the type of person that would sleep better at night knowing that your resume is never going to get filtered out by an AI bot because of some degree that you have or don't have. At the end of the day, everyone is so different, and I think it's just worth taking time to reflect on what feels right to you, or even better, talking it through with someone who knows you and cares about you, who can help you think through some of this in an unbiased way. So that concludes this video. I'm gonna attach some links here for some other ones that might be helpful for you. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm super grateful for you watching, and if you're in the thick of making a decision, just hang in there and know that both routes can absolutely lead to an amazing design career. See you next time. All right, so I just realized I was talking for about 4 minutes without recording anything. So the main point is that back at that